Hi, welcome to another episode of Faith 234. And this week we're going to talk about the events that transpired in chapters 7 through 10 of Mosiah. So we're going to start in chapter 7 with verse 1 and why it's kind of good to know about what their motives behind what they were doing here.
King Mosiah said that people had been teasing him or were thinking maybe nagging or keep questioning about the group that had left to go back to the land of inheritance with Zeniff and whatever happened to them. And so he sent the group out. And it just made me think, we don't want to forget about people who have, if they've left the church, if they just, have left us. We just don't want to forget about our loved ones. We want to know where they are, how they're doing, what's going on in their lives. And I think it's important to stay in touch. So it just kind of made me think of that.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago when Aunt Joanne was alive, she had a dream that my grandma Emma, her mother, appeared to her and kind of said the same thing about some of her siblings who were not active in the church and how important it was to reach out to them and not forget them. And Aunt Joanne and then her daughters have been really good about that, much better than I have. But even some of my older siblings have been more in contact with some of their cousins, which I think is really good, even though they haven't been active in the church for probably ever. So
yeah, we still love them and we want to stay in touch.
But then when we do that, when you look at Zeniff's his motives, it was good. So he was sent as part of the group to go look up these people, but then it didn't work out. But then he on his own in verse 21 in chapter 7, in 8, in 7, he wanted to go back down on his own. So he took his own group. But if you go back to Omni and look at what the Lord told Mosiah, the first Mosiah, in 12, he told Mosiah, he warned them that they should get out of the land. They should flee that land. And basically save themselves. So what Zeniff was doing was opposite, and that was just basically a prophet ago. So or maybe not that long ago. So Zeniff was actually going against what the prophet said. So he may have had good intention. He may have thought, this is a good thing. I need to go find these people. But then he wanted to stay and live there, and that was exactly opposite of what Mosiah was told to do. So we have to be careful. Sometimes our intentions may be good, but if they're against what the prophet says, no matter how good they may seem, we need to give that some second thought and maybe rethink it. Maybe pray some more about it and rely on the Spirit to tell us if what we're doing is really what we should be doing, or maybe we should be listening to the prophet. So I'm going to go probably with the prophet. So, go ahead.
One of the examples that someone talked about in one of the podcasts was, if your group of friends is going to go out and party and you say, well, I'm going to go with them and be the designated driver, you're still taking yourself somewhere that you shouldn't be going, and it's not going to end well. So we just need to make sure that we're doing the right thing, that we're following the Spirit, that we're going where the Spirit will continue to be with us. Follow the prophet.
So next, later in chapter 7, so we're talking about Ammon and when he finds King Lemhi. So Lisa was impressed with Ammon's and Lemhi's response when they kind of met up.
And when they met up, and first they were grabbed and taken into bondage and left there for a couple of days. And here they had come to rescue these people. It says when he was finally permitted to speak, he went and he bowed himself before King Lemhi and explained to him who he was. And I thought that showed a lot of respect, where he could have come in and said, hey, you guys messed up. We're here to save you, and you do this to us. But his attitude was one of respect for the king and his position. And because of that, I think they were able to work together. And that just kind of impressed me.
And then as he got talking to Lemhi, Lemhi recounted how they got there. It's impressive how he was accountable. He realized, he didn't make excuses, even though, it was his father that messed up. But still, even they, could have, said, they could have played the victim. And later on in Mosiah, in chapter 10, it talks about how the Lamanites did that and how they were always saying they were the victim because, Nephi robbed from Laman and Lemuel or whatever. And that didn't get them anywhere, you can see. So sometimes we just have to swallow our pride and admit that we were wrong or, we made the mistake and move on. And until we do that, we're never going to achieve what we want to achieve or, accomplish what we hope to accomplish. It's never going to turn out good if we always play the role of the victim. So it's just an impressive way that Lemhi responded to all that had happened to him and his family. So then in chapter 8, they talk about prophets. So I like where it talks about, prophets, sitters, and revelators, but then in verse 18, it says, and thus God has provided a means that man, through faith, with mighty works, or through faith, might work mighty miracles. Therefore, he becometh a great benefit to his fellow beings. So that's the prophet. And we've said this before, but just how through our life we've witnessed the blessings in our lives, and it's just the people in general who have chosen to follow the prophet or trust in the prophet. And whether it's focusing on the Book of Mormon, like Ezra Taft Benson, President Benson said, going out and visiting and caring for rescuing people, like President Monson, focusing on the temples, like President Hunter, whatever the case may be, lengthening our strides, President Kimball, thank you, and of course the things that President Nelson's told us. So prophets are a great benefit,
and I like the way it's put there. Prophets don't come in with an agenda. They are, given these means to see the future, see the mistakes of the past, counsel and teach us for our benefit. It's not for their own benefit that that they have these abilities. It's to bless us.
Yep, and that comes from God. It starts out in verse 18. Thus God has provided. So God's the one that directs them, and we have to remember that and keep that in mind, that they're telling us what God wants us to tell us. So
yeah, they're the messenger.
Yep. And then back in chapter 9, Zeniff, or now going back to Zeniff, he sees good in the Lamanites, and so he wants to go live with them, and they allow him to do so. But then, by the time you get to verse 12, the scriptures are referring to the Lamanites as lazy and adulterous people, which, I don't doubt that they were. But we had to be careful when we stereotype people, because Jacob, generations ago, saw a lot of good in the Nephites, at least the way their families were and how the structure of the family. And if Zeniff would have, and I know that he was tricked and taken advantage of, but I still wonder if maybe they'd have tried a little harder to work with the Lamanites, maybe compromise a little bit, maybe break down some of those stereotypes. If they wouldn't have gotten into strong a bondage as they had, but maybe they went in, and as they were building up their cities, maybe they got a little bit prideful and looked down their noses at these lazy, adulterous Lamanites, and the Lamanites were saying, "Hey, we'll shut down your pride pretty quickly," and they did. But it's just kind of speculation. But I think it shows that even in people who have completely opposite views of you or us, or even groups or individuals, there might be some good in those groups, and we can't just discard anything and everything they say. But we still have to keep open minds and think, okay, well, there might be one or two things that they say or do or that we can learn from. So just avoid stereotyping. And then also realize that, on the other hand, not everything we say or do is right. That sometimes we do have to swallow our pride and realize, oh, well, that was a mistake. And then own up to it and move on. But cooperating, I think, between people, groups, organizations goes a lot further than combative stereotyping and name calling and bickering or whatever, arguing. So, anything to add?
Just that, they say all the way through, the Lamanites taught their children to hate the Nephites because they were wronged in all these different areas. But at the same time, it almost looks like the Nephites were saying, but these guys are lazy, and these guys, and so maybe there might be a point on either side, but it's just up to us to not judge.
Yeah.
To love everyone.
Yeah, and to be willing to work with other people. We're talking about what's going on over in Israel and Gaza, just how rooted those conflicts are. But yet, if both sides would just say, yeah, we've made mistakes, or previous leaders have made mistakes, and we're sorry, and then the other side says they're sorry, they could work together and resolve it.
All right, so in 733, I liked where they said, if we turn our heart to Christ, that he will deliver us. And that's what they were looking forward to was deliverance. And there's all kinds of bondage that we can be in, spiritual, emotional, physical. And if we turn our hearts to the Lord with full purpose of heart and trust in him, then he will deliver us.
Yeah, I like what you pointed out earlier, that a woman talked about her time in prison and realized that she was in bondage spiritually before she even started doing the things that got her into prison, right? Yeah,
that she had already, she had lost her integrity. She had started going down that path before the physical bondage took place, that she was already felt like she was lost. But she did turn to Christ, and she said after she had done her time in prison, she realized that she had been delivered both spiritually and physically from the bondage that she had been in.
And even at the end, when she thought she was going to get out early in time for her son's high school graduation, they changed their mind and made her serve her full sentence, which was 3 more months. But that time she could have just been bitter and just, gave up. But she told her husband, she says, no matter what it takes, no matter how long the bondage lasts, I'm going to endure it well, and because I know it's part of the repentance process. So, bondage can come in both spiritual and physical ways, but we have to be careful of the spiritual bondage, because that can get us into big problems.
And that seems to be what happens first, is if we lose the spirit and we start down that road, that it can lead us to, some kind of physical bondage, either addiction or, whatever.
Yeah.
But, so stay close to the Lord.
And his spirit. Today in priesthood meeting, Elder Corbridge talked about the spirit. His wife has dementia or Alzheimer's, and he says in the last, and it's been known for maybe 3 years, he mentioned, or it's been diagnosed, but he said in those last 3 years, he said usually the spirit comes to him as, still small voice, subtle promptings, whisperings. But he said in the last few years, sometimes the spirit has actually yelled at him to tell him that it's not her fault. Because she'll, just with dementia, that sometimes your brain can kind of get stubborn and get locked in on certain things, or obviously forget things. And it's been a real trial for him, but he's had the spirit apparently pretty strongly tell him that it's not her fault, and that's been a blessing to him and his marriage, so that that marriage doesn't end on a sour note, because they've had a great life together. So recognizing the spirit and staying and keeping the spirit with you is very critical, very important.
And recognizing different types of bondage that can take place, and knowing that the Lord will deliver you if you turn to him.
Yeah, very good. All right, so
keep the faith.
My fault. All right, so that's all we have for this week. So remember to
keep the faith
and keep the commandments.
Love you.
Bye.